I have been noticed by the mold queen. Answer, it helps girls. It tells girls they have the right to things of their own. It tells girls they have the right to say no. I wanted to talk about like something a little bit more serious, right? I do want to tell people what is like happening in the world and what is like going on, because I think it's important where like the general public stands, or like where the loud vocal minority stands, where they're like pushing with anti-trans stuff, right? Like, obviously, as like a trans creator who is on Twitter, who is like active in these spaces, I get like a lot of pushback, and I get like a lot of negativity, and I see a lot of negativity from these spaces. When it comes to the UK, for instance, we had Pink News posting the article about Girlguiding, which is a scouting group. They released an article. Girlguiding will no longer allow trans young people to join its scouting groups under new update to its inclusion policies. The group, which was previously known as Girl Guides, announced on the 2nd of December that it had made the quote-unquote difficult decision to ban all trans girls from its groups, including the Rainbows, Brownies, and Guides and Rangers. The organization first allowed trans girls to join its scouting group in 2017 after passing new guidelines aimed at supporting all girls and young women. However, it has since reversed those guidelines following quote-unquote detailed considerations in the wake of the Supreme Court's judgment determining that the 2010 Equality Act's definition of a woman referred to quote-unquote biological sex only. It was an inclusive group. There were no issues for about 8 years, and then the Supreme Court ruling basically pressured the staff and whatnot into banning those that are trans. We are talking about like 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, young trans girls being banned. I made a tweet being like, serious question, who does this help? Literally excluding young girls from activities just because they are trans. This is only contributing to the mental health issues that trans people face due to being ostracized. If you remember back in the day when the LGBT Alliance was writing a letter to the NHS being like, oh, now that like the UK Supreme Court ruled that woman means someone who's biologically a woman, this means that you shouldn't give trans children puberty blockers and like access to like resources and whatnot, because no matter what, they will never be allowed in these spaces that align with their gender identity. That was like their reasoning. It's like, oh, because this happened, now, actually, you shouldn't give trans kids, trans adults access to healthcare that they need, because they will never feel normal anyways, because they will never belong anyways. Let me find this. Survey of over 90,000 trans people shows vast improvement in life satisfaction after transition. Less than 3% of trans kids detransition, and of those who do, most only because of the hate they face from deranged bigots. Trans people are overwhelmingly vastly happier after they transition. The thing is like, yes, gender affirming care benefits you, right? Like if you do not have this mismatch between your sex and your gender identity, and you don't have like this dysphoria, you can still be depressed and like anxious and isolate yourself and whatnot if your environment is still insisting that you are not who you say you are, and they want to actively push you out of spaces that you belong in, right? So the entire argument is basically like, oh, okay, so women's spaces mean biological female spaces. This means those trans people should be pushed out. And then it's like, oh, why are trans people like unhappy? I thought gender affirming care would help and benefit them. Oh, so now we should also like use that as reasoning to ban gender affirming care and whatnot for trans people, to make it as difficult as possible. Just so you know, all these TERFs who are talking about like the predatory trans people, the predatory men that dress like women in order to invade women's spaces and like steal the achievements from the real women and whatnot, they're talking about like 10-year-old trans girls here, right? When they talk about like how trans women are just like fetishes and they have AGP and they are just making the real women uncomfortable and whatnot, they're forcing themselves in these spaces. they're talking about like 12-year-old trans girls. They're talking about trans girls, young trans girls who just want to be included in activities that make them feel normal. And in 2017, you know, the rules were adjusted to include all girls, no matter if trans or cis, right? Something very progressive, something like very inclusive. But no, TERFs are using the UK's Supreme Court ruling in order to pressure them into excluding young trans girls, right? So they did this update. This update includes information you may find upsetting. Please take care when reading. From today, it is with a heavy heart that we announce trans girls will no longer be able to join Girlguiding. This is a decision we would have preferred not to make, and we know that this may be upsetting for members of our community. There will be no immediate changes for current young members, but more information will be shared soon. Most adult roles, including unit helpers, district helpers, and administrative support, are already open to all, so we are confident that no volunteers will have to leave the organization. Girlguiding believes strongly in inclusion, and we will continue to support young people and adults and marginalized groups. Over the next few months, we will explore opportunities to champion this value and actively support young people who need us. I made this tweet and I had like someone reach out to me. The staff members there, they are just like devastated with the results, but like they've been pressured into dropping them because, you know, they do not have like the funds in order to keep this going. What is just like insane is like the level of like hatred for like trans people, right? A lot of like the TERF rhetoric is like, oh, because you're born male, you are evil, you are a predator, and everything you do is to harm women. If you're born female, then you are a victim. That is the entire like root thought process of them. It is making out the patriarchy and like everything that like comes from it, with like, you know, men benefiting other men, protecting other men, you know, like the amount of like misogyny that's like being downplayed and justified and so on. They're making these things out to be something biological, something that is caused by testosterone, by your DNA, which is like a very defeatist type of like attitude, very like, oh, this is just like the nature of life. Men are going to make women suffer. The males are going to make the females suffer. They're not talking about like the evil sexual abuser who now wants to like identify as a woman and pretend to be a woman in order to get into the women's prison in order to like essay them there. Like, this is not this rhetoric. This is literally someone going like, oh, these 12-year-old trans girls want to harm the real girls by invading these spaces. And a lot of it is like very ridiculous, right? There are like people calling into like the radio station and saying like, oh, it should be fine as long as they have like the gender surgeries, right? They're talking about like 8-year-olds. They want 8-year-olds to go through like bottom surgery, like castrate themselves and whatnot in order to be allowed in these spaces. That is like how fucking brain broken these people are. It's ridiculous, obviously, right? So I made this tweet and you see, oh my god, this has 2.3 million views, but only 5.8 thousand likes, 8,200 comments. You go through there. First, it helps girls to understand that they matter, that they can set boundaries and say no. Second, it helps the boys who have been lied to, cruel people who have told them they are girls, that they will be seen and accepted as girls. Now they know that's false. Maybe it will deter some of them from taking puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, which would greatly benefit their long-term health. Third, it helps restore boundaries and a sense of reality in society. This is the way that these people are talking about this, right? It's like, oh, okay, so now that like trans girls are no longer allowed and included in like spaces for young girls, why should they even transition? Society makes it so difficult for them to be themselves. Why would they like go on this trip? My entire life, I had the thought of like, oh, transitioning is not good enough anyways. I will never be a real woman anyway. What is the point? Why should I go and, you know, start HRT and so on? Like, if I'm never going to be seen as a woman anyway, what is like the point? It's crazy that like society is like moving into a direction, or it used to move in a direction where it's like, you know, we have access to healthcare. We know like from the studies and so on that like the only way to cure gender dysphoria is to go and medically transition. You know, social transitioning is incredibly beneficial for like trans children, trans adults. Having a supportive environment is incredibly beneficial for one's mental health and so on. Like we see all of these things, and then, you know, Trump won, UK turfs and so on. Like the constant like boosting of like these voices of those who are saying, you know, who are spreading lies and misinformation about like trans healthcare, who are speaking about like genital mutilation and, you know, experiments and whatnot. Like everything that like society was working towards was like doing for, you know, the trans community, which is, to be fair, way too little, right? Like the bar is incredibly low when it comes to like trans healthcare, when it comes to making an inclusive environment for trans people and whatnot. But it was like slowly moving in the right direction. But with like all the propaganda, this is where it led to. They initially were like, oh, these men interests, these like 60-year-old men are now identifying as women. Like, look at them. They're like balding and whatnot. Look at all the prisoners who are now coming out as trans in order to get special treatment and whatnot. Like, you see all of these things, right? Like, that's kind of like how it started. Then it was like with the women's sports, like, oh, the men, the mediocre men are now identifying as women in order to steal the medals of the hard-working female, right? It was like the next step, and now we are talking about like literal children. Make it so fucking difficult for children to feel normal, for trans kids to feel normal, feel included, and so on, and then, you know, bully them out of these spaces, call them predators, label them as like they're groomed into this, force them to repress, make it like so difficult that they have no other choice in order to like except for just hide. Do you not think that girls deserve something that's theirs without men or boys included? Are you saying girls don't have a right to privacy away from boys? Right? It just like highlights the core issue of being like, oh, if you're female, then you're a girl. If you're male, then you're a boy. Trans girls actually don't exist. Trans people don't actually exist. They're just confused. They're just mentally ill, right? That's like the rhetoric. Who does it help pretending boys are girls? Trans is an adjective. Boys who are trans boys, not trans girls. Therefore, as boys, they should not be competing in girls' athletics. What? Yeah, trans boys are not trans girls. That's true. If you're a boy that is trans and you're a trans boy, then you're not a trans girl. That's correct. And boys shouldn't be competing in girls' athletics, even though, you know, like, what type of athletics do the brownies have? Anyway, so I made this tweet. I saw something. I saw a familiar face. Quote tweet me. I have been noticed by the mold queen. Answer, it helps girls. It tells girls they have the right to things of their own. It tells girls they have the right to say no. It reminds girls that the desires of boys do not supersede their feelings, their rights, their discomfort, or their safety. This is how they talk. It's the mindset of like, you're born male, so you're a predator. They teach this not just to, you know, invalidate trans girls, obviously. They're also using this rhetoric in order to teach young boys that they are predators, which is, you know, incredibly gross. This is not what feminism is about. Just so you know, this is not what feminism is about, right? It's not the male predators and the females, like the small little victim. But like the idea that trans girls are a threat to cis girls, and that, you know, they are forcing themselves in these spaces and making young girls uncomfortable. And that is basically like the same thing of like, oh, women can say no to men. Women shouldn't have to fear to stand up for themselves and say no to a man. It's a lot of like, you know, trans girls being included in these spaces, in these activities, is essentially the same thing as women being forced into sexual encounters with men because they are taught that they have to submit to men. That is their rhetoric. This is what this rests upon. Shouldn't a feminist be happy that a young quote-unquote boy wants to join female spaces to learn female behavior and socialize with girls? No, because that is like stealing. Girls should have their own spaces without the fear of a vicious man taking it away. So, there's this. Girlguiding says it quote-unquote believes strongly in inclusion, apparently apart from for girls and women. Would you let your daughter join an organization that demonstrates such blatant contempt for young women? Look at this. Look at what they're saying. This is the TERF movement. This is like the feminism of, of TERFs. To be like, oh, these trans girls are a threat. They are a danger. Such a woeful understanding of safeguarding issues. Had Girlguiding said we got this wrong, maybe that could be forgivable. But claiming to be making the decision to exclude males with a heavy heart, etc. is just insulting to the young women in the organization. They literally completely lost it. Janet Murray, like all TERFs, thinks 6-year-old trans girls are predators. Nasty, disturbed people, usually riddled with religion, obsessed with cruelty and genitals. The ghastliest of the ghastliest. Ban, ban, ban. Today supporting a cruel decision to ban young girls who are trans from the Girl Guides.
Ban, 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 ban. Ban, 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 ban.
Trans women banned from female toilets in Hollywood.
No, it's not a Christmas song. It's what...
Transgender women may be banned from women's NHS wards.
Trans people here in the UK.
Transgender women banned from women's jazz events.
To absolutely everything.
The FA has banned transgender women from playing women's football. This grassroots club is fighting back.
The latest being today's decision by the Girl Guides to ban girls who are trans, all in the wake of the rotten and corrupt UK Supreme Court ruling back in April. This is
victory for common sense. Trans women and women. Court rules as JK Rowling and Kemi hail victory for truth after female-only spaces battle.
Is absolute nonsense, and the best way to show that it's nonsense is that girls, cis girls, can
more girls than boys are signing up as scouts.
Still join the scouts. So if cis girls are allowed to join the scouts, but girls who are trans are not allowed to join the guides, please just make it make sense. But again, it just typifies what's going on in Britain at the moment. Trans satanic panic. There's no logic to it whatsoever. It's ruining trans people's lives. It's making living a normal day-to-day existence in the UK close to impossible now, because everything is a ban. The
thing is, like, they're going after trans employees. Like, always there's outrage when like a trans woman is working in like a clothing store, because, what if they're predators? What if they're just pretending? Like JK Rowling under her other alias, Robert Galbraith, was actually writing about like this instance where a serial killer man was dressing as a woman in order to give the sense of trust to other women and then murdering them. Like, obviously, like this is like what the purpose is of all the trans people. Is like, that's what they do. They're all predators. Like, all of this hysteria. Literally, all of this hysteria is just to exclude trans people and make them more, like, miserably, right? Like, to just ruin trans people's life for no reason. Like, this is not a win. This is not a win for young girls. Claiming that, like, all males are predators and evil and whatnot. Like, this is just going to uphold the patriarchy even further. You're going to neglect even more young boys. To use that rhetoric and apply it to trans girls is obviously fucked up, but the rhetoric itself is so incredibly dangerous. We ask to be included in the same spaces, they get mad. We ask to have our own spaces, they get mad. When are they just gonna admit as a whole they don't want us as trans people to exist in public? I mean, it's getting close there. But the thing is, like, a lot of like the rhetoric literally boils down to like the same arguments over and over again. What rights do trans people actually not have, right? And then you're saying like, oh, wait, they are banning trans people from the spaces that align with their gender identity. There's no right for like basic human dignity and whatnot. The respect of one's identity and so on. And then it's like, well, but like, you know, trans women are not actually women, so these bans just make sense. So obviously, like, this is not a right that's like being taken away. And it's like, yeah, that's the problem. That is the problem, that you're using the rights that trans people don't have, you know, the right for human dignity and whatnot, to justify going after including us in society. Just came here to say that as a cis woman, JK Rowling is a bigger threat to my safety than trans women could ever be. Trans people are literally doing nothing wrong. We constantly have instances like this. That's currently like the thing that is like going on with, you know, Dead by Daylight and like a women's tournament where it's a female only space. So you gotta prove that you're a real female by sending a male kick streamer your documentation, your ID, and a video of your face. Yeah, nothing is going to go wrong there, right? But like everything is for like the safety of like young girls, because like what if a transgender woman is invading a woman's tournament and like actually doing good? Like the unfair advantage that they have. So AFAB can't have one single event for themselves with fair gameplay and no fear of men playing with fake profiles. I don't care, I'm looking forward to this event, and people with more than 2 brain cells should be able to realize that shit has nothing to do with transphobia or anything. Transgender women have a way higher chance of having a long list of prior comp experience because of the times where they still identified as male. I've got literally proof of that from when I tried to create a women's only comp team, all women that had a shit ton of comp experience were transgender. Nothing wrong with it. However, you cannot tell me that this is not a huge advantage over biological women. Please, we need a man to ensure that only the real women are competing. A lot of it is literally like, you know, defeatist attitude, victim complex, and learned helplessness. You'd be like, oh, because you are born male and you went through like a stage of transitioning and you were perceived as a boy and you were socialized, like you're just so much better than I could ever be. Like, how should I ever compete? Like, it doesn't make sense, obviously. Like, I'm just going to lose. This is like the logic. But this isn't even like, you know, a tournament, competitive. This is like a scouting troop. This is just like wanting trans girls to be included in activities for girls, to socialize with other girls, to, you know, be made to feel normal. It's like this rhetoric of like, what if boys start pretending to be gay for them to be invited to girls' sleepovers, and then they see girls, and what if they like undress themselves and the boys aren't actually gay, right? Like this is the rhetoric that they're using. How can they think that they are sane? How is that like some sane thing? The whole unfair advantage thing is entirely based on misogyny and the belief that men are inherently superior. Yeah, a lot of it's just like skill issue, learned helplessness, and just like the victim complex. Like the poor cis woman, the poor female, biological female, just wants a chance to compete, but it just doesn't matter. Like everyone who is male has just a biological advantage at like baking cookies. It's so stupid. It is so dumb to exclude trans women, trans girls, because they were born male. Can you imagine if they like started excluding intersex girls? Can you imagine that like a Girlguiding would be like, only those with XX chromosomes can join the organization, and they scan like the chromosomes and whatnot, and then, you know, there's a cis girl with like XY chromosomes or XXY chromosomes and whatnot, and then it's like, no, you can't join. Can you imagine if Girlguiding was like, from now on, cis girls, biological females with red hair are just banned? They're making like the others like uncomfortable. Like it's just, you know, it just doesn't work. Like it's wild. You know, TERFs are going to use the rhetoric that like, what if a lesbian is joining Girlguiding, and then they are around other girls and they're lusting after other girls. Like, that's crazy. The thing is, like, Girlguiding actually went ahead and they are now allowing trans boys to join Girlguiding. So they are actively, you know, like TERFs actively pushing out trans girls because they are boys. But they're forcing trans boys in there because they're actually girls. Do you remember like the one tournament, like a college thing where a trans man was forced to compete against cis women? And everybody was like outraged, being like, this man is competing against women. And it's like, that is what you wanted. That's literally what you wanted. Or when like trans men are forced into women's bathrooms, like this is what you want. You want men in women's spaces by pushing out trans women because of like your rhetoric is not aligned with reality. Everything is literally so dumb. And then they are saying, oh no, like trans people are just making things that they are just too complicated now, right? We got women that look like men. We got men that look like women. And then, you know, they go into like the women's restroom and there's someone who looks like a woman but actually has a penis. And they go into like the little cubicle and then they're peeing behind closed doors. Like, oh my God, what if I hear someone in the women's bathroom peeing using a penis? Like, you know, and, you know, they should all just be banned. They should just, like, all be banned because, like, it's too complicated. Like, do what you want behind closed doors, but, like, don't go outside and, like, use things where other people are going to see you because things are just, like, too complicated. Imagine I go into, like, a boutique and like, a clothing store and I see a woman and I ask a woman for help. What if, you know, I'm just, like, standing there and wondering if that woman has a penis? Like, you know, that's just like, it's hurting. It's hurting my brain, yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I hope that they are like pushing it so far, like making it so ridiculous that normal people, you know, that are not chronically online and like stuck in their weird, like, TERF ecosphere are just going to speak up and say that like, oh, this is kind of fucked. You know, they're coming after like trans girls who just wanted to like, you know, join like girls' activities and whatnot and feel normal. Like, they are not predators, obviously. Like, you're talking about literal children. I think more people should like start waking up and like see all of the warning signs that were like leading up to this, and you know, that we can like break free from that. But right now, things are getting like ridiculous in these senses. Anyway, I thought it was funny that JK Rowling quote tweeted me. This was also like the only tweet there for like a really long time. Glinna also made like a really stupid tweet. Wait. I was like, Gender Critical is a hate group led by JK Rowling that is using patriarchal misogynistic nonsense to harass the marginalized of the marginalized. This disgusting cult targets trans children, normalizes SA of trans women, and abuses cis women who are quote unquote perceived to be trans. Yara right now. This Graham Linehan. So it's like, it's not too late to look into the mirror and delete this one, Glinna. Gonna also sub to a woman's OF. Oh yeah, obviously. There's like a there's like a GIF, I think. Wait, is it that one?